welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia. This is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Hey, my sweetness, how's my baby boy?
Doing okay.
How
Doing
was
fine.
Pesach by you?
I was next to you, Ima, the whole time.
I know. Like I said,
Yeah.
how was Pesach for you?
No, Pesach was good. Pesach was good. I actually was speaking to Ruthie about this, and she was saying that, we had a really good time. People were on their best behavior. There wasn't any issues, no fights, no nothing. Everyone was just really good. Like Leon Hart, it just went really smoothly.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem was, I think what it is everyone is growing up and realizing, hey, we're not perfect, especially those of us who are becoming married, becoming parents.
Well, it's funny because I was looking at one of our sisters, and I remember growing up and getting very frustrated and annoyed and whatnot and all these things, and I'm realizing like now I just take a step back and be like, oh, that's just them being them. There's nothing about it. Like, you can't change them, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't really affect you. It's not really like it doesn't. I understand now where your Huda would always say like, oh, like if they don't pay your bills, you have no reason to listen to them.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I always raised my children with the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. But there's something about when Pesach is over that I feel like I'm digging out from a hurricane.
What do you mean?
From the aftermath of a hurricane.
Oh,
Trying to find my chametz stick of stuff, because a lot of times the last minutes, right before Pesach, when you want to clear everything out of the kitchen, you just want to get all that chametz stick of stuff out of the way. And so you're just taking stuff and just putting them in cabinets and locking them up. And like, you really don't care. I mean, you're kind of organized. I mean, basic things, but there are sometimes towards the end, you just want to get the stuff out of the way so that you can do the batikas chametz at a decent time and get to bed at a decent hour. And then after it's over, it's like, now where did I put that can opener? Where did I put that spatula? Where did I put that serving bowl?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't clean up the house for Pesach this year because I wasn't really in the house at all for Pesach. But like other years, yeah, like you really I don't know, for me, I had everything kind of organized. And I kind of put things together, put things away. Like I never really had those problems either growing up either, because everything had its own designated spot. I think it's more difficult when you have a small house where you have to constantly replace and go back and forth. Like, do you have Pesach cabinets, or do you have to put everything in totes?
Yep, and I have Pesach cabinets, Baruch Hashem. But I remember though, with you kids growing up, when we had it's when you have Kenai kids and a bigger family, that's where it gets where you really need a lot of stuff, and you have, to really. I remember going up, especially with us in Baltimore, with a basement, going up and down a basement, up and down with the microwave, up and down with the large convection oven, up and down with big cases of the pots and pans. The other thing is this past Pesach, the funny thing that happened was I usually in the past haven't used canned goods because your father and I held by having everything fresh. But this year, I wanted to make spaghetti. I wanted to make meatballs, like Swedish meatballs, with tomato sauce. And so I picked up a can of the Pesach tomato sauce. And when I wanted to make it, I realized I had no Pesach can openers.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was no problem though. I ran out to the nearest store and bought a couple, and toibled them very quickly. And then I was able to make, was doing Chol Hamoed. But it's so funny, like little things when you're readjusting or you're even moving. I remember having moved into the house here in Florida, and after everything was all set up and we were all moved in, your father wanted me to make him a tuna fish sandwich. I said, sure. I had I went over, got a can of tuna, mayonnaise, and opened the drawer, and we have no can opener. Hmm.
Yeah. Did you clean for Pesach when you were growing up?
No, not really. I remember my mother cleaned the kitchen very well. But as
Okay.
for the intense Pesach cleaning that a lot of families do, where they do the drawers and they do the closets and they almost combine like spring cleaning with their Pesach cleaning, that we didn't do.
Did you do the check for Radika? Did you burn your chametz?
No, we didn't. We didn't do any. I didn't do any of that until I became frum. And I remember the first year I decided to do it. I hadn't moved to New York yet. That Pesach, I think I was still living with my parents, but I think I spent Pesach.
Hey, Ima, I can't hear you.
Taking classes by that time. Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. We got interrupted with a spam call. I decided, that's when I found out, the first year I became frum when I was still living with my parents, I found out that you're supposed to do a badikas chametz, supposed to be your chametz. So in my infinite scientific wisdom, I made the 10 pieces of bread and folded them up in silver foil.
Oh yeah, it's hard to.
And I didn't realize it, but after I did the badika, I took the pieces outside to burn them, and to my shock and surprise, oh, silver foil doesn't burn.
No, it actually doesn't. It's why you were talking about your oven, and that if you put aluminum foil over your oven, it's going to crack the glass because it holds in the heat.
Yeah, we're not oven. You're talking about my electric,
yeah.
My what's it called? The glass top electric stove that I had for the first time in my life. Because I heard from your sister that one of her neighbors who had just moved into Florida for the first time was experiencing using a glass top electric stove, and he covered it with silver foil.
It cracked.
To make a long story short, I think they needed to replace the entire stove. I'm not sure, or at least they need to call the company and get a whole new top.
Out of curiosity, were you aware of the various Pesach traditions like burning your chametz and searching for chametz, and you just didn't do it, or you didn't even know?
I'm trying to think back. I didn't know. I only knew that by 10 o'clock in the morning, I had to finish eating chametz, because I remember my mother, when I was a little girl, giving me breakfast, giving my usual cereal, and watching the clock and saying, remember, you got to finish this by 10 o'clock. That I do remember. But and the funny thing was, the Haggadah that we got at our Hebrew school, it was an Orthodox Hebrew school. And the Haggadah, when I think back, in the very beginning of the Haggadah, it did mention the searching for the chametz, and it did mention the biur chametz, but it's like we skipped those pages. We totally skipped those pages and just went right on to the steps of the Seder and to the Magi. But I don't remember anything being mentioned in Hebrew school about the badikas chametz or the biur chametz.
What Hebrew school did you go to?
Bet Tefillah.
Oh, you went to Bet Tefillah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bet Tefillah back in the day was pretty conservative. It wasn't like Orthodox or anything like that. So I think they wouldn't really focus on that. I remember growing up still, but Bet Tefillah was in that category. It's only now that they're becoming more Orthodox because of the influx, because of what happened to Rambam.
I think the Jewish schools in general, all the Jewish schools in general, are becoming a lot more, how can I say,
practicing?
Not exactly, practicing. Excellent. That's an excellent word. I mean, I hear, I taught for a couple of years in a Reformed temple.
Okay. And
when I taught in the Reformed temple, that was right before then. They had a conclave every few years. The Reform, whatever it is, whatever they call themselves, whatever their organization is, gets together and has a major conclave where they decide what their platform is going to be. It was in the early mid 1980s that they changed their platform completely and decided that they were teaching the mitzvahs, and they were also including more Hebrew in their services, but teaching the mitzvahs with the idea that these are the mitzvahs. As an educated Jew, you should know what they are. It's up to you whether or not you wish to follow them. So they that's when we received we had the model Seder. That's when we received the new book about the mitzvahs that they were going to teach. And it included Shabbos and Kashrus. It included the steps of a Jewish wedding, the actual steps of a Jewish wedding, the steps of a bris milah. They actually included that in their book about who does what in a bris milah, and the steps of a bris milah.
Yeah, it's very.
Did I tell you about that mother? I think I mentioned before in the program about the Israeli mother that called me.
No, what do you mean?
Okay.
Tell me, you know.
Okay. After we passed out the books and we began the year's curriculum.
Wait a second. I think I do know this.
Yeah. I could repeat it though for any new listeners.
Sure, why not?
Okay. This Israeli mother calls me and she says to me, I've called to tell you that I've given up. I said,
yes.
I said, you've given up? She says, yes. I said, what do you mean you've given up? She says, I told my husband I did not want to raise our children Orthodox in any way, shape, or form, but they needed to go to some sort of temple in order to be bar mitzvah. So I chose the most reformed temple in the area. My son comes home with this textbook, and what do I see? Shabbos, Kashrus, bris milah, steps of a wedding. And that's when I told my husband, forget it. There's no way of running away from it. We're Jewish, and I guess we're going to have to learn these things.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting listening to other people's perspectives and finding other versions of Judaism from other people. It's a kind of a shock to me sometimes, because I knew it was there. I just didn't realize people still, have these feelings, and it's just I find it odd that you don't just admit you're doing something wrong. No one, it is what it is, and life goes on. But they want to try to go ahead and play this game where it's like, well, it's okay because of this, it's okay because of that, yada yada. I don't know. I find it kind of odd. I think I've mentioned before that it just doesn't sit well with me.
I think it's important for people to have the accurate information. What they do with it is their business. We're not to dictate to people how to live their private lives, but at least they need to have the accurate information so they know this is the situation. It's like when I passed out Shabbos candles, when I first started, when I was just become firm, we were passing out Shabbos candles.
Yeah.
One of the saddest things was when someone would tell me, I don't like Shabbos candles, I'm not Orthodox. And I would say, you don't have to be Orthodox to like the Shabbos candles. All you have to do, just be Jewish. You don't have to be Orthodox. And that really upsets me when people use that excuse for not even receiving information. No, I don't do it. I'm not Orthodox. Yeah, but you can at least find out what the information is. I also feel badly for so many men, especially my generation, intermarried, thinking that because they were Jewish, their children were going to be Jewish, not knowing the accurate information that if you marry a non-Jewish woman, the reality is your children are not Jewish because it is recognized through the mother. And I think I've heard so many heartbreaking stories of men who sent their kids to the Reform temple, sent them, to the Reform Hebrew schools. And then when their kids grew up, their kids, fell in love with and wanted to marry a non-Jewish girl. And of course, the father was very upset because he thought, hey, you're Jewish. I raised you Jewish. And then they find out, with the information age, hey, they're really not Jewish. Their mother is not Jewish. Therefore, they're not Jewish. And the father is just is devastated. His entire life, he has lived, with inaccurate information and based a major decision on what he thought was accurate information, and it just wasn't. I told you that story. Oh, I would tell the story about the woman I met. This is interesting. I was driving from, I think I might have mentioned before, but it's a good story to repeat. I was driving, I'd just become from, I'd spent my year at Machon Chana, and I was driving back for the summer to spend the summer with my family. I'm driving down 95, and something told me that I should stop at the Maryland House and pass out Shabbos candles. So I stopped at the Maryland House. First of all, I needed gas to get gas. Mm-hmm. And this gas station attendant comes over to me and says, "Lady, step out of your car. You're not going anywhere." I went, "Huh?" He says, "Come here, I got to show you something." The tread on my tire was peeling off.
Oh, wow.
He says to me, "You would have had a blowout at 70, which would have been fatal." And so, of course, so I bought a new tire right then and there. And he told me it was going to take a few hours. So I walked around the Maryland House. I passed out Shabbos candles to a lot of different people. The people, in fact, some people took it for their children, for their little girls. And then my tire was fixed, and I'm leaving. And I'm going towards the ramp, and I drive by. In those days, there was a car called the Gremlin, I think. It had a hatchback. It had a back where it was a small car, but the entire back opened, and you could sit there in the back and have a picnic or whatever, So I drive past this woman, and she's got these little kids with her, and they're obviously having this little picnic in the back of their car with the, hatchback open. I drive past them. I go up to the ramp, and I'm about to go into 95, and something told me I should back up and talk to this woman and offer a Shabbos candle. I put the car in reverse, and she is standing there watching me back all the way down the ramp. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, what is this crazy woman doing? And I keep backing up and backing up and backing up until finally I'm right in front of her. And I said to her, "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, "I'm passing out Shabbos candles. By any chance, would you be Jewish?" So she says, "My mother was Jewish." And I said to her, "Well, that means you're Jewish." And her mouth dropped. And she goes, but the woman was totally shocked. And she says, "But my father was Catholic." And I said to her, "Doesn't matter, ma'am." I said, the Jewish law is, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. And she just kept repeating, but my father was Catholic, but my father was Catholic. And I said, "Ma'am," I said, "if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish." So I said, "Would you like to have a Shabbos candle?" So by that time she had calmed down, and she said, "Well, thank you very much for the information, but no, thank you. I don't want a candle." I said, "Okay, fine." And I just drove off. And here was a woman, and obviously she was married, and she had a bunch of kids, and she just found out she's Jewish, and her kids are Jewish.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I often wondered about that family. I said, for all I know, she was probably sending her kids to a Catholic school. And now she finds out, guess what?
Well, it's interesting. I think as a friend of ours was talking about how their father went to Catholic school when he was younger, Orthodox Jew now or was an Orthodox Jew. And he was going to there for educational purposes. And everything was fine and dandy until one day came to dinner, and before they had dinner, he crossed himself, and his mom saw that, and she's like, "All right, that's it. You're not going anymore."
No, it was his grandmother.
His grandmother.
What happened was his mother, unfortunately, had been raised during the Holocaust and was terrified to even admit she was Jewish. So it was I don't know if it was the father's mother or the mother's mother, one of the grandmothers was there visiting. And when she saw that, that's when she said, "Forget it, he's going to TA." And the very next day he was a TA.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Just the reactions, especially because today's Yom Hashoa. I was thinking about the whole idea. It's like, I know that I was against having an extra day to commemorate, because we have Tisha B'Av. We should use Tisha B'Av as a commemoration, because you don't want to add to
sadness.
the sadness. You don't add sadness to the Jewish year. But it's just so interesting when it comes to like Jewish identity and how it's going to affect, because eventually what's going to happen is the Holocaust survivors are going to all fade away. They're not going to exist anymore. And it's really up to us to have their memory live on. And I think the best way to live on their memory is to be a practicing Jew. I think it's
your father said something very meaningful one time. He said, what they died for, you should live for.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a very interesting story in one of the Chabad publications about this young man who, the same thing, his parents had sent him to a Catholic school for, like you said, the education. And they were given an assignment that they, I think in his senior year or something, that they had to write a biography of a great sage. So he was in the public library and he was looking, and he came across a book about Rambam. And he said, I'm Jewish. I think I'll write about Rambam. So when he submitted his report, the priest, who was his English teacher, called him to the side and said, I noticed you wrote a book about a Hebrew sage, Maimonides. He says, why did you choose Maimonides? And the young man said, well, because I'm Jewish. And the priest was a little surprised. And so the priest, he said, sat there at his desk for a long time, like tapping this pencil, thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. And he said to him, after you graduate, I want you to go to Israel and look up this school. I think the school would be really good for you. And he wrote down the name of a Baal Tshuva yeshiva in Israel. So he decided to take this priest's advice. And he did. He went, after graduation, he went to this Baal Tshuva yeshiva and he became from. And a couple of years later, he decided he was all from, he was, black hat, beard, everything, decided to visit the priest at the school. And so he comes to the school, and the priest sees this like rabbi sitting there. And the young man says, Father such and such. And the priest looks at him and goes, yes. Like you're thinking, what is this rabbi doing? He goes, don't you recognize me? And he said his name, and he says, oh yeah. He says, nice to see you. We're so happy to see him. He says, I want to thank you so much for sending me to this yeshiva in Israel. And as you see the results. So he asked the priest, he said, I'm curious. He goes, I'm very grateful to you for sending me there, but why did you send me there? And the priest said, I'll tell you a story. He said, before he took his final vows, he decided to visit Israel, and he was at the Kotel, and there were some young men that approached him who didn't know that he was Catholic and asked him about putting on tefillin and maybe coming for a Shabbos. And he said, he was just curious. So he didn't tell them he was Catholic. He said, okay. So he went with them to this yeshiva, and he said he was there for a few weeks, and he really enjoyed the learning. He enjoyed his time there, found it very spiritual. And after he left, then he came back to the States and took his final vows and became a priest. And he said, but he always felt badly that in a way he had deceived them, that he didn't tell them who he really was. And he decided the way he was going to make up for that was he was going to, if he ever had the opportunity to send them a Jewish soul, he would do it. And he says, when you did this report on Rambam and you told me you were Jewish, I decided this was my opportunity.
That's awesome. Wonderful story. All right. That's it. That's our time. Thank you, Ma. I love you.
I love you. Have a great Shabbos, honey.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook at Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I know you would like it, and my mother would too.